Kurt Alcoholic, my thanks for asking me to come. And I really was moved by Bill's pitch. Um, and it's the first time I've really heard my story told by someone else with a slight deviation. At 20 years, I drank. And, but everything he said up to that point was, that was my experience. I'm one that says the menu's not the meal. And I was worshiping the menu for a long time without knowing it. There was no way for me to know that I was doing that. Um, when you asked me about what's the topic, I wanted to talk on this bondage of self. And the reason I think this is crucially important, and the reason I think that's because it's what shifted my life. And Bill talked about it a little bit. And is there any way you can let me screen share? That's the set aside prayer. This was written in 1987 in a workshop we did in Santa Monica. And this prayer in that workshop basically came from a guy named Don Pritz, who told Joe Hawk that he knew enough about AA to be dangerous. And so this prayer came out of that conversation. These are all the reference points in the big book. So just to bring it back to the big book, because I had a lot of people, oh, that's not in the big book, Well, in our big book, it says, be quick to see where religious people are right. It does not say be quick to see that religious people are right. And that's a whole nother topic, that ability to discern the difference between the true and the false. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. It was a great discovery to find out I was not the actor. I say this a lot. Thank God I'm not suffering from what's not happening anymore. I suffered immensely from what was not happening, meaning a narrative in my head that was telling me what was going on. Isn't it funny? We're the last people to find out we have a drinking problem. That ought to tell us something. This inability to see the true from the false. So let me say it like this. And some of you, I hope you hear or you see this condition of self is something other than you. That would be my hope today. And I can only point to that. I can't talk about that. I can't give that experience. But what I can do is I can use metaphors and examples. And here's one. So let's use the big book terms. My thought life's placed on a higher plane. You entered the world of the spirit. It looks like this. You comprehend the word serenity. You know peace. You can look the world in the eye. All the promises, very descriptive of what it looks like. So here's my example. Versus, there's the difference. Another way I like to talk about it is, and William James, I think it's really amazing that we put all the stories in the big book. in the back of the big book that show how each person established their relationship with God, right? Well, that's exactly what he did in varieties of religious experience. That he probably borrowed that from William James. I mean, those were some lectures that were given, I think, in 1902, Gifford lectures, and they were put in a book. And I read that book in I read parts of that book in 1987 and 88. And I did because I had one of those revelatory experiences. You could call it a parting of the veil. You can call it, many things. When that happens to you, there's a curiosity that's awakened. And I got in the program, and in 1986 I got sober. And when I say I got sober, I don't mean I did it. I got relieved of the obsession that enabled me to be sober. That's what happened. And I got involved with AA. I moved out to California, came out of prison in Texas. And I did everything we do in AA. I worked the steps, got in with a group that if you didn't work it the way we did, you didn't work it. It became very dogmatic, and that was a phase. I mean, I remember Pritz used to say that all the time. He used to say, if that doesn't happen, if you don't go through that evangelistic stage, you miss something. See, and I think about this because what I heard Bill describe, and this is just me, I heard Bill describe how it works. The pattern of reality, the growth process that we go through. And it's not fault. It's not, it doesn't come from the lens of self, guilt, shame, remorse, self-pity, morbid reflection. These are all effects of what it looks like to look through that lens. So I needed a new way to see, not to think. I needed a new way to see. Now, I didn't know any of this. What I knew was my life had become unmanageable inside and out at 19 years sober. And in my mind, I had worked the steps. I'd been a GSR, I'd been a CSR, I'd sponsored guys, I'd crossed the T's and dotted all the I's. And the problem was, I could not hear you. I had gotten to a point where I could not hear you. There were a lot of people around me saying you're in danger, and so I love Chuck C's book when he says the conflicts, the most baffling characteristic of alcoholism is the conflicts of sober reality. This is sober reality. And a little farther down in the book, he says, I drank to preserve my sanity. That's exactly what I did. I didn't understand that that's part of the book that said the guy quit, and he 25 years, and with 4 years, he was dead when he picked up. I have that experience. I know what that looks like. It's almost like when you quit drinking and you pick back up after that many years, it's like that never stopped. It's really a strange phenomenon. So what happened basically was there was a lot of people trying to help me. And rather than surround me in a surrender experience that needed to happen to me. And a guy gave me a prayer, and I'll just tell you briefly what it was about. It was about, I was in a meeting that I didn't normally go to because they didn't use the big book. Now remember, I'm drinking vodka every day. And I didn't want to go to this meeting because it was a men's stag. But I was willing to listen to the guy, and he said, go up there. They don't know you up there. So I went to this meeting, and a couple of weeks into it, with all the judgment and the voice in the head, I finally blurted out in the meeting and blamed everything on my wife. How she screwed everything up and how she left and da-da-da-da-da. And when I left the meeting, this little guy followed me out to my plumbing truck. And he said, I noticed you raised your hand as a newcomer. And I said, I did, because I was drinking this morning. And he said, I want you to stop that. I said, well, I was drinking this morning. And he said, you're not a newcomer. We didn't design that for this. Everybody knows you up here. Every time you raise your hand as a newcomer, you put more guilt and remorse on the condition you're trying to extinguish. Stop it. And I heard that resonance of truth for the first time in a while. A couple weeks later, I came back in the meeting and complained about my wife ruining everything again. Of course, he followed me back out to the plumbing truck one more time. And he said, can I make another suggestion? And I said, sure. And the only reason I was willing to listen to him was because of the conversation we had before. And he said, if I write a prayer for you, this is the prayer. He said, will you say it? And I said, sure, I will. And I said that because I just trusted him for some reason. God, give Rhonda the very best that life has to offer. Give her health, happiness, and prosperity, and a peace and serenity that she's never known before. Basically, what happened was I said the prayer for 3 months. That prayer happened to me in my house. And I like to say I had a spiritual experience in my house that day. It's not true. What really happened was the me that I thought I was fell away, and the real me showed up, which I know today is the real you. That spiritual aspect that I was trying to access through belief, and it never got me there. I tried to believe things I was supposed to believe in. Tried to believe things that I should believe in. And you could say, like the book says, the needed power wasn't there. So what happens when you wake up in what the big book in 10 steps says? You entered the world of the spirit. It's like it's talking to you. All of a sudden you understand things you couldn't understand before. All of a sudden the obsession's gone. All of a sudden you're in a different place from where you're looking from. From that place, I could see how, I like the way Don C. told me. He said, I said, I think I know what happened after this experience. I said, I think, Don, I was managing my life for 19 years with spiritual principles. And he said, that's not what you were doing. He said, what you were doing was you were managing your life with your ego's interpretation of spiritual principles. That's very different. And of course, that resonance hit again. So why did I pick the bondage of self? I thought I identified with you at the podium when you shared. And now I do, on a spiritual level, I do. But what I was identifying with, and I didn't know it, was the condition that was driving you, not you. Let me tell you a little story about a guy, Jonathan, that was in an AA meeting. And Jonathan said, I've been saying the third step prayer for 3 years. God, relieve me of the bondage of self. And he said, I get up and I do my thing. I ask, consider my plans. I ask for my thought to be directed. He said, and I consider my plans. And at the time, his plans were external plans, not internal. And he said, I looked at my day. What was I going to do? And he said, I'm going to the AA clubhouse. I'm going to answer the phones. First, I'm going to take my kids to school because my wife works. Then I'm going to go work with some sponsees in the afternoon. Then I'm going to pick up my kids. And he went on like this. And he said, I suddenly realized, oh my God, I've been relieved of the bondage of self. All his actions were showing that. He said, that's not the takeaway. Here's the takeaway. Every time he asked to be relieved of the bondage of self, when he was relieved of the bondage of self, just reinforced the lie that he was in the bondage of self. And he kept that going until he had eyes to see it. And I think this is what happens here. I needed to go through. I would not change anything. If I could change anything in those first 19 years, it was the dysfunction that was caused by untreated alcoholism in my family. And what I know through amends and what I know through the ability to access real forgiveness is that those relationships with both my sons and my sons and my wife, former, have completely changed. That's how I know that can be healed. She's 39 years sober, I think, now. And we got sober together. And we have a great relationship. That we probably get along better now than we did when we were married. And it's the result of what, I think Bill mentioned it about. This was the integration of these principles in my life, a way of living. So only I could do that. Only I can go to the beach, make a tobacco offering, offer some water, burn some sage. That's my little thing. Nobody's going to do that for me. When I asked to be divorced from self-pity, the past, dishonest, I can't see in the moment because I'm looking through an ego lens from the past or the future. Self-seeking, the future. What I'm really asking for me is what the book says. May you find him now. Divorce me from self-pity, the past. Self-seeking, the future. The dishonest view in the present moment. And let me be here. Let me be here now with you guys. So the effects of that are profound. I mean, that's why I got so interested in Bill's pitch. I had the same kind of, some of us say it's educational, some of us say it's sudden. Doesn't matter. If it's sudden, you got to unpack it for the rest of your life, so it really doesn't matter. This bondage of self. Let me define it just this way, and it's a false sense of authorship. This bondage of self showed up in my head And it was based on narratives that I learned, conditioning, belief systems, old ideas, trauma, guilt, remorse. This is what formed that view. And until that veil was parted, I knew that there wasn't anything else. They say, the main problem centers in the mind. Yeah, we have a spiritual solution to a mental and physical condition. We don't have a spiritual solution to a spiritual problem. In the realm of the spirit, there is no problem. I have a head that tells me I'm spiritually sick, and it's not true. That's never been true. It's part of that experience that says, oh my God, I've been looking everywhere and I've been carrying it with me the whole time and I didn't know it. It's that release from that existential crisis of unworthiness that our first speaker talked about. Some people call it a hole. It's almost seemingly a hole, just like a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. It says I'm a victim of a delusion that I could rest satisfaction if I managed well. I thought managing well was what you did. That was my reference point. It would be like, say I have a three-dimensional consciousness and I'm trying to function in a fourth dimensional consciousness with the three-dimensional consciousness. It will not work. Activity knows nothing about stillness. Now, if I have a fourth dimensional consciousness, it's applicable in 3, 2, and 1 dimensions. In the book, it says our thought life's placed on a higher plane. It's a different way of seeing. And that different way of seeing changes the way we think. It shifts the perspective. It says, I have a thing on the back of my card that says, the intellect will bring you to the house, but it won't let you in the door. That's from Shams. That was Rumi's teacher. The intellect will bring you to the house, but it won't let you in the door. See, I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew it. So Don told me this. Don C. said, look, the 12 steps are 12 gentle ways to bring you into harmony with principles, laws, and values that are working all the time, creative intelligence. Now, I would disagree with him about gentle. I didn't think it was that gentle, but he said, and when you're in harmony with it, he explained it to me like this. He's a traditional man. He said, there's 4 directions. He said, in the East is where the first 3 steps are. That's your relationship with God. He said the next 3 steps are in the South. And that's your relationship with, and I'm going to use this word, not yourself, but the self that's driving you. The next 3 steps are your relationship with others. And the last 3 steps are, he called the elder's wisdom. I would say that's what gives us the ability to understand and listen and perceive things we couldn't perceive before. You know how many times you read the big book and all of a sudden you go, man, I never saw that before. I've read it 1,500 times. See, there wasn't fertile ground for any of that to land. Another friend of ours says, see, the steps happen by accident. I mean, the awakening happens by accident. He said the steps just make you more accident prone. I kind of like that, you know. I mean, that's the whole grace thing, isn't it? We don't. That's the one thing we realized, or I realized, was I didn't get myself here. I did this program completely wrong, if you want to put it in the context of duality. But when I saw that I was not the condition of self, the door that opened was the possibility to be free from the bondage of self. And I've heard others talk about this. This was Eckhart's experience when he said, I can't live with myself anymore. And all of a sudden there was this voice that said, who is this self you can't live with? There was that separation. Byron Katie, same thing, laying on the floor. I mean, the more we investigate this realm of the spirit, the perennial philosophies, the things that the book suggests, the more we hear different dialects of one language. In AA, we call it the language of the heart. We have ears to hear. I don't need to debate whether it's right or wrong, or I agree or disagree. I love in James' book, he says, truth identifies itself. It does not need your help. It has a resonance. We talk about it, continue to watch, not listen. There's a huge difference in watching and listening. And so this was the, I want to say, discovery of being around here. And I don't think I could have realized this at 1 year sober. I don't think the evolutionary process of growth was there. You know, there's a promise in the other sister program, Al-Anon. Can we really grow to such proportions? Only if we accept life as a continuing process of maturation and evolution towards wholeness. You know, I think about this in the context, I use this metaphor a lot. It's the Wizard of Oz. I never got, in those 19 years, I never got free from fear. I never got free from mental anxiety or the narrative in my head or guilt, shame, remorse. Because I was bound to this self and didn't know it. And I think what's really funny is when it says in the fear inventory, we list our fears, we ask ourselves why we had them. Well, what I always did was, when they asked that question, I didn't go to the next part in the book. I answered the question. I told a story about why I had the fear, which created more fear. But when I saw what the book said, when it said we ask ourselves why we had them, then it asked me a question. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed? Wasn't it because I relied on this narrative that in We Agnostics, they was trying to get me to see the whole time that God's been involved in this all along? It says, without knowing it, we've been brought here by a certain kind of faith. Trust, dependence. That's my translation. In what? In the God of reason. My thinking. Really not mine, but thinking. So I trusted everything that went through this head. There was immense faith. And it finally made sense. On page 55, it said faith had been involved all along. They're not trying to convince me there's a God. They're trying to convince me that I've already been worshiping a God, the one of reason. Big difference. So I needed these shifts in perception. And I needed them so I could look back and see like how things were. Well, a native friend says it like this: God writes straight with crooked lines. It made sense. It all belonged. There was no guilt. There was no remorse. As another friend of mine says, and I love this, he said, "You're not responsible in amends. You're accountable. You're accountable. Balance the books. Balance the books." Don Pritz said something to me one time. He said, "Listen, I want you to know something, Kurt. I want you to know you're special. You're not extra special." And that finally makes sense. Both of those finally make sense. So we have been given a tremendous gift here. And I'm really, really appreciate the people that will step out and share their experiences, especially people that have been around here a long time. Because it's not the history of AA, it's my history, it's your history. So I think that's all I've got. I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so